This second video for our ecology unit is kind of going to go in two different directions. The first thing that we're going to look at is environmental changes, short versus long-term changes, and the effects that these changes have on organisms and traits. So environmental changes are basically changes in the environmental conditions that can affect the survival of individual organisms and or entire species. There's two types: short-term changes, which occur quickly and affect organisms immediately, and because they happen so quickly, populations don't usually have the time to adapt. It kind of forces them to either move, change their behavior, or become extinct. Long-term changes, on the other hand, take a very long time to occur, or they occur slowly over time, and they affect organisms over generations instead of just one particular generation. Some long-term changes can permanently alter an ecosystem, and over time it can lead to adaptations in organisms. If they aren't already present or they don't develop, then those populations can become extinct. As far as some examples of environmental changes, there's a table in the middle that shows the short versus long term. So for short term, there's drought, smog, which is pollution in the atmosphere, flooding, volcanic eruptions, blizzards, pollution. Not listed in the table, but also or equally important, catastrophic events and natural disasters like tornadoes, hurricanes. Anything that happens relatively quickly and kind of gives an instant change would be considered a short-term environmental change. As far as long-term, there's ice age, deforestation, urbanization, global warming, extinction of a species, radioactive waste or pollution, and even the resulting features of tectonic plate movement, whether it be the actual motion of the continents like continental drift or mountain building. The thing to remember, along with the different examples, is that both short and long term can occur naturally or they can be caused by humans. As far as these changes affect on traits and subsequent populations, for short term, there's not really any time for traits to adapt because the response to the sudden environmental change is immediate. But for long term, the organisms that are best adapted to these changes will ultimately survive and pass on those traits to later generations, while the weaker organisms are eliminated from the population. This is what you probably know as survival of the fittest or natural selection. Okay, now we're going to switch gears and look at ocean systems, focusing on human dependence on ocean and modifications of the ocean from human activity. So as far as humans and how we depend on the ocean, there's a multitude of things that we depend on the ocean for. Main things are food, the weather, as far as, if you can recall from our last unit, 2 units ago, how the oceans affect our climates, transportation, recreation, other things like minerals, drilling. There's a lot of things that we depend on the ocean for. As humans, we kind of have a tendency to alter the environments that we live in, and while some of the alterations and changes we make are positive, the majority have a negative impact on the environment and organisms that are in the environment. So some modifications as far as oceans include overfishing and runoff. Those are negative things. Runoff is when chemicals and trash flow into the ocean from rivers and streams. Other negatives listed to the right: introduction of exotic species, which can kind of take away resources from the already existing species, oil spills, habitat destruction for development, and global warming, which leads to rising sea levels. As far as positives, we create artificial reefs to replace the ones that are being destroyed, basically just man-made underwater structures that promote flourishing marine life, replanting of native crops, restocking fish hatcheries, land reclamation, and fishing regulations are all ways that we positively have modified ocean systems.